Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular planning board meeting of October 16th. Chairman Curry is on holiday this evening and asked me to fill in. At the meeting last month on 9/11, we followed an old tradition and cited the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to continue that tradition and ask you to join me right now for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Barbara? Barbara?
Is there anybody here at the grandstand?
Hello? Can we take roll call?
Chairman Curry, Acting Chairman McNamara.
Here?
Mr. Zverda.
Here.
Mr. Prince.
Here.
Mr. Goldenberg.
Here.
Mr. Vito.
Here.
And Ms. Gannon.
Thank you. First item on our agenda is the consideration of our minutes of September 11th, copy of which has all been circulated. Are there any concerns or comments or corrections? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Okay, first regular item is Granite Point re-grant. This is a motion, we're asking for a motion to approve a 90-day extension or re-grant of the preliminary subdivision approval, tree preservation, steep slopes, wetland, and stormwater management and erosion control from October 30th of this year up to and including January 27th, 2020. Any 20. It says to 19, to the year 19. Just any thoughts or concerns?
Only that we have a memo from our planner saying she has no objections.
Right. Any comments? No. Okay, I'll make the motion to grant the 90-day extension to January 27th, 2020, in accordance with the town law, section 276(7) and section 150-13M. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Aye, unanimous. Thank you. Next item, new private school in Somers. It's a discussion of the amendment to the zoning comprehensive plan and the fitting of the proposal within the OB 100 business district. I've reviewed it. I have no problem. Other than the residential nature of the student dormitories, I do not see a conflict in the proposal to be with that of the OB 100 district. It is the proposal is for a for-profit organization. I noticed that the proposed changes to section 170-27 and sections 170-92A amend that code to include some of the accessory uses for the school. I, for one, have no concern.
I don't know if the applicant wants to say anything about the zoning or...
Up to you.
No, basically, the applicant, as part of their petition, in support of the new school, provided the zoning. This zoning was provided by the applicant, not by the town. We have looked it over, and it will be part of the SEQRA review that is currently ongoing with the town as lead agency. So this is to accommodate it. You will see that there are still 2 blanks in here, which cannot be filled in, and those I'll just point out to you, just so you're clear. On page 4, letters I and J related to the FAR, and the percent of lot coverage and accessory building coverage. Once the planning board, you as the site plan purveyors, start the site plan review, then we'll be able to determine exactly what those numbers should be. Related to all of that, what I had to do for the town was take a look at the comp plan. And at the time, I mean, the major changes really relate to the fact that at the time that this comp plan was done, we knew that Pepsi had left. We did not know that IBM was in the process of vacating their campus. So that was not reflected in here. So a lot of the language, when you look at it, is really to reflect that occurrence and to update it so that it's clear that that language now is reflected in here, and that both of those campuses are basically being adaptively reused. Pepsi less so in the sense that now it's simply a multi-purpose office building, but this is the major adaptive reuse for the other building. So that's what's reflected in the language of the comp plan. I don't know if anybody had any comments on it, but that's really what I did going through all of that, trying to find those places where it needed to be found. You also will see that the county, as part of this entire process, both for the zoning and for the comp plan specifically, the county planning board has a role in this, and they are required to review and make their comments back to the town related to any kind of amendments on a comp plan and a zoning ordinance, and they did in the September 20th memorandum, and basically talked mainly about the integrity of the architecture of the IMP buildings as their major concern, but other than that, they had no problems. So really, I'm just looking to the board to see if you have any other comments that you want, because this was referred to you by the town board. If you have any comments that you want to relay back to the town board, and if you seem fine with everything, then that is the memo I would write. So that's really what this is in front of you for.
No, I was speaking for myself, not for the board. Any comments,
A
concerns?
very minor comment. I'm reflected in here as being opposed to multifamily housing, and that was a misrepresentation of a question that I posed, which I couldn't understand how the applicant's attorney could state unequivocally that multifamily housing wouldn't be allowed. And the reason I questioned it was, he's not our attorney, he doesn't do our zoning, our attorney does our zoning. And our attorney spoke at that time and said, it will be in the amendment to the zoning, and it is. But I don't oppose multifamily housing, which upset me to see that there. Unimportant.
Yeah, I think that the proposed changes, which are the town board purview, not ours, to the allowed accessory uses covers it, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. Gentlemen, any concerns? Any additions to go back to the town board? Any suggestions?
I do have a broad question, which I'll throw out that no one has to answer. When I visualize how we're going to subdivide it, I then ponder those lots that are not involved in the new school. I ponder how can they be reused. And so that's the question that remains in my head. Does not have to be answered, and it's not your responsibility. So.
Okay. All right, so basically, I will give a memo back from the planning board to the town board that you have no significant issues with what is being proposed in these two things. So, thank you.
Yeah,
And I should say that in short order, I have had discussions with Bonnie Van Olsen from the applicant's team related to, what are the next steps. And we are going through, you probably received the next batch of material, and we are going through that in the consultant's offices, Joe's office, my office, traffic at FP Clark, to determine whether or not it addresses all the concerns that were identified in all of the correspondence from both of our meetings and from all of our offices that we had. Once we have determined that all of those have been addressed, it will go back to the town board for completeness, but the applicant would like to put on your November agenda a preliminary overview again in advance of submitting a full site plan application that would be on your agenda in your December meeting. So,
Our December meeting.
in your December meeting, and that is just the beginning of your site plan.
No, our December meeting is a problem.
yeah. We can't set anything for the December meeting
Till we know
because
where it is.
of a special vote on the night of the 11th, which is our regularly scheduled meeting.
Okay.
So we can't
will not
meet
be able
here.
to have that meeting.
Here.
You either have to move the meeting physically or calendar-wise.
Okay, well, we will definitely be addressing that.
But as far as setting actions for next meeting in November, I have no problem with that. Are you proposing actions for our next meeting?
No, no actions, they just want to be able to come before you.
They want us to work
Okay,
on
so
it.
add them to the agenda for our November
Right.
meeting.
Right.
That's fine. Okay? Thank you. Item number 3, Banfi Ward application for subdivision approval. This is a very, well, I guess it's an action to formalize a transaction between two adjoining neighbors to transfer approximately 1 acre of land between the two lots. It's a simple lot line change, and I think it's an uncoordinated review that we're looking for, and a type 2 action.
Well, it can't be a type 2.
Can't be.
Because of a quirk in a change from the state law to your local law, which we'll have to address.
Oh.
But we can say it's an unlisted action, and for this particular one, let me just see what I've said here, because the zoning is to be finalized prior to conclusion. And therefore, what we have to do is you do have to set a public hearing, unfortunately. So set a public hearing for the next meeting. It's unfortunate, but the town secret law needs to be amended because
For
the
lot
type
line
two-
changes.
lot line changes until prior to January 1st, 2019 were not type 2 actions. But the revised SECRA law made lot line changes a type 2 action. However, we have to go by the state SECRA and by the town SECRA. And town SECRA was not amended. And therefore, we can't do this at this time until we change this law.
So that's something for the town board's agenda.
So it's something we have to submit to the town board. Very perfunctory, but it still has to happen. So therefore, we have to set a public hearing and have them come back at the next meeting, and then we can make it, you can waive everything you need to waive and give them their approvals, but we must do it in that way.
Okay.
Will there be a drawing so that we can see what we're doing?
Will there be a drawing? We have a drawing right now, if you'd like it. Do you have your application with you? Otherwise, we'll...
Yes.
So let the applicant come up and explain it to the board. We should have it a large scale, Barbara. Yeah, we have the large scale if you want to put, excuse me, would you put this up? Yeah.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, okay, next time we'll bring it in.
And,
Yeah.
yeah, if you would, just put it there and go over it very briefly for ourselves and the folks at home, showing where the lot line change is taking place on the map. Please.
Yeah, so,
Would, sir, just step behind the podium so the microphone, we can pick you up on it.
yeah, sure.
Thanks.
Or you can pick the microphone up
Take
in
the
your hand.
microphone with you, just pick it out
Yeah,
and keep it
can
with you.
serenade us that way.
Then the folks at home can hear you.
Okay, so the solid line here is the existing line. This is the Ward Banfi property, and this is 25 Mosman. 25 Mosman is buying the acre plus or minus from the Ward Banfi property, and it's that, this is this hatched-in area here. It's
So
just
the
woodland.
The area that's hatched is
Yeah.
the area being transferred.
Yes, to 25 Mosman.
This area
That's
is
being
being
transferred.
transferred to that.
For the record, can you
That's
state
what I
your name
didn't
and who you
understand.
represent?
I'm Paul Rowan Land Surveying. I'm a licensed surveyor.
This is being transferred to here.
Right.
Where do these people live? Where's
Gives them a better yard.
We
Both conform to the zoning
Why this is
requirements in
being-
terms of square footage.
Can you just answer
Sure.
why, I mean, I think I know, but why is this being done?
Just,
Maybe,
I don't really know.
yeah, I think,
Why is the action necessary?
no,
Or why are they doing it?
why are they,
Either one
why,
will do.
yeah. I mean, I think
Excess acreage.
Oh, hi, I'm Bruce Ward.
He has excess acreage. in the-
Part of it
That's what I
is,
figured.
Here
Oh,
comes
sorry.
the answer.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, part of it was when we originally purchased the property, there was an encroachment on the property by the previous tenants to the property now, whereby they cleared off a lot of the land and it was flat. And so it became, it's flat to their yard, and yet it was part of our property and the previous tenants had it happen. So this is an effort just to basically say, like, we have 6 acres right now, and it's the farthest part of our land. We don't get to it. Our neighbors are great. We met them, and she's a fabulous gardener, and just really out of good faith. They have kids, we have kids, and I'm not sure if I'm explaining too much, but it just seemed like a logical thing to do. And then in terms of the sizing, we had to put it to a size that at least made sense economically to sort of make the sale.
And that none of this action changes the zoning area?
Not at all.
No,
It's all
they
compliant.
both still are, what, 2 acre zone?
Yeah.
Was it, was
It's
was
2
it,
acres.
Just under 2 acre, R80 there, 80,000 square
R80,
foot.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and, yeah, the chart here outlines
it was on
the
your
requirements,
Right.
square footage after the.
But you weren't paying taxes on it, right? I don't mean on your property, but you weren't paying taxes on that improvement to their property. That's the question.
No.
No, definitely not. And
I understand it's a friendly,
It's a friendly transfer. We've grown to really like them as neighbors. In a certain level, this will also preserve the integrity of the woodlands in the sense that, by splitting it up, nothing's really going to be, we're not going to subdivide it to put a house there or anything like that. And it'll actually allows better caretaking of the woodlands on their side as well as ours. And so it seemed to make sense.
was there any problem with the, I see the pool is quite close to the, the original property line.
Exactly, and they had an encroachment of their pool and their generator on our line, and
Right.
so,
Not the pool.
not the pool, but the facilities of the pool, the
The pool,
equipment.
the pool's 10 foot away, but the generator is right on.
Right
the
smack
property.
in
Oh,
there.
right, okay, I'm sorry. I mistook the generator for that underneath the GE of generator, but I see it's now on the property line. Okay.
So it gives a little bit of space.
Yeah, it seems very logical. I just wanted to hear if that was the reason. Okay, I'm satisfied.
Yeah, I am too.
And should these other neighbors in the back here not like this idea, they would be up for public comment on it next month?
Right, they get notified, right.
Oh, yeah, all neighbors are notified,
Okay, I just wanted to.
all adjoining neighbors.
Right.
Or across the street.
So all the board really has to do is
Declare lead agency.
declare lead agency and, well, you're, declare yourselves as lead agency, because we're not going to circulate this, and set the
Set a
date for a
public
public hearing. I would like to say one thing
Sure.
in compliment to these people. I have a lot of people who come to my office asking about submissions, even a lot of professionals, particularly Ms. Bamfey, who called me several times, did this entirely on her own, absolutely understood exactly what to do, questioned me intelligently, and I dare say did it as well or better than some of the professionals that go through our office. So thank you very much for your diligence.
You get the Good Citizen Award.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Is there then a motion to declare lead agency?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion to schedule a public hearing for our meeting on November 13th. I'll make the motion.
Second it.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. See you next month.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Thank you.
What? She's good.
Some weird lots. You see these lots?
Oh, one's so oversized, they got excess property.
No, I know, but these others.
This is what we're.
Like that?
Then my other neighbor takes it out.
Yeah, 100 by 400.
Exactly.
Who drew up these?
You know, when they did the
50 years ago.
when they did the Angle farm, they found out people had their pools on the Angle Farm property.
No, I
Prominent people.
yeah.
Okay. Next item, Kennedy Catholic High, re-grant. Good evening.
John Correll for representing Kennedy. I'm the new engineer on this. This project was approved in 2017.
We need the mic.
The permit expired sometime in 2018. We're here for a re-grant. It's exactly the same plans that First Form did. And we have helped, in late last year, we got approval for the septic system. It's not a septic system, it's a holding tank for the concession stand. From the
Which
health
has yet to be
department.
built. That's the one
Yes, that
thing that
has
has not been built.
Hasn't been,
Right. Joe's memo kind of summarized the whole thing.
but there's no change.
No change, absolutely no change.
I remember that.
Except that we now show there's going to be a holding tank for the septic from the concession stand, which the health department approved.
And that was always a part of the original.
That was part of the
application.
original, because I remember
Yeah.
questioning what
Right,
they.
and the only thing, just so you know, we've gone through this and we went back and forth of, do we have them prepare a new site plan or, you know, and because the location of that tank is gonna move a little bit, I didn't, Ms. Retner or I thought it was necessary that we can handle that as part of the submittal to address one of the conditions, and frankly, where the tank is now is much better than where it was originally, so.
And it's
Yeah.
simply a site change. It's within the same building envelope.
Nothing has changed except for instead of the tank being here, the tank's gonna be over there.
Things changed a little bit.
Right.
field change.
But if it's in the same envelope, we don't need to reevaluate it.
No impacts.
No,
I'm assuming the football field lighting was accomplished?
That's already done.
That's already done.
Yep.
That's
So
done.
the only thing that's outstanding is the concession building.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
and, any concerns or any, just waive the,
The easiest way possible.
Right. So, given all of that, the only way to proceed on this so that they don't have to go through all of the normal site plan review procedures is basically what I've put down is that the board has to make a determination under section 144, which gives you the opportunity to waive all of those required procedures, including waiving a public hearing. Due to these special circumstances, you can read it here, and then once you have made that determination, you would vote to approve the re-granted site plan approval.
okay. So then the first part is I'll make the motion to waive this required site plan approval and procedures, including the waiving of a public hearing. Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Now a vote to grant, re-grant site plan approval, including all prior determinations and conditions.
So move.
Second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Also unanimous.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jack, you know when they want to start building? You're trying to get that
What
done this year?
happened to the plan that was up
Trying to
there?
get, did you, we got it?
He gave it back.
Oh, we give it back, okay, okay, good.
So you'll be going to the building department for the building permit? Okay. If that's the only outstanding condition, I don't remember the other ones, but call me if you, the office if you want to go over.
Good evening. Next item on our agenda, Cobbling Rock Estates. This is a subdivision.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Matthew Gironda from Bibbo Associates. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. We were previously in front of the board since our previous submission. We have conducted a site walk with the board. We have had the opportunity to revise the plans in response to comments from the town planner as well as the consulting engineer. Prepared a preliminary SWIP. The drawings presented to the board as well as the consultants were for a conventional subdivision, 9-lot layout, essentially for the basis to establish a lot count. And the intent is, the applicant intends to proceed with a conservation subdivision. If the board,
He does,
yes, if the board would so grant us permission to do that. The, we're sort of here tonight asking the board with, and based on discussions we've had with the town planner as well as the consulting engineer, and we could have further discussions tonight about it, on how to proceed forward with the conservation layout and asking the board to acknowledge this conventional layout as the basis for the lot count on a conservation subdivision.
I remember the site walk,
Yeah.
and I remember the property, and I remember that I think we all agreed on the lot count. I don't think we agreed on the conservation.
No, we didn't.
Okay.
How did that come about?
That was essentially what was discussed with the applicant as a way to preserve some of the environmentally sensitive lands and stay off of the areas that really are undesirable to develop. If the board does not want to proceed with a conservation subdivision, that's a different conversation.
We need to see
Absolutely.
A and B.
Yeah, what, can you basically give us some kind of an understanding of a general thing of how this is gonna, what you're aiming to change?
So what we would aim to change in the conservation layout would essentially be can illustrate it better on the constraints map.
Turn it just slightly towards us, please.
Okay.
Thank you. That's
Good.
good.
As you can see from the constraints map, there is area of steep slopes
Yeah.
along the eastern portion of the parcel and the western portion. There is actually currently walking trails from the neighboring property that comes through, which essentially would be the area that we propose to put in conservation. The steep slopes through here, we would propose to put in conservation and not touch, as well as the area along the western, southwestern portion of the property to allow future access, conservation, things of that nature to be used as it currently is today. The conservation subdivision, obviously, if the board allows us to proceed in that manner, would allow us to propose lots with less required lot frontage, and would allow us to push some of the building sites into the more desirable area, flatter area on the site to develop and stay off of the environmentally sensitive lands.
Question.
Sure.
In the conservation concept, how does the lot size change?
Yeah,
If we're thinking 2-acre zoning,
that's three.
This is actually 3 acres.
3-acre zoning,
3 acre.
So.
I don't want them on 1 acre.
No. Well, the minimum lot size for a conservation subdivision, I believe, is 60,000 square feet.
You know what I'm saying, though.
Right. I would anticipate that the lots would be somewhere between 60 and 80,000 square feet. When we actually lay that out, we could certainly fine-tune that number, but that's where I would expect to be.
1.5 to 2.
One- yeah.
How-
Two
My-
acres instead of
2
3.
acres, which is the adjacent zone, actually, on Whitman Drive and Cobbling Rock and Dr. Tony's is actually all R80.
Yeah, my big question is, who are you proposing to take those conservation parcels? Or are they going to remain part of
They
a
would-
homeowners association?
They
What
would
are you-
essentially be a conservation easement that we could establish an HOA, which I think is probably the typical way that it's been done in the past, that a homeowners association would be established and each parcel within the subdivision would have equal ownership of that conservation easement, and be responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of that. If there was another entity who wanted to assume control of that, we could certainly
there
put it in
isn't.
conservation,
There
but
isn't.
there is not.
Nobody's
There's
running to do it.
Right. So we would be establishing a homeowners association, and the owners of the lots within the subdivision would each own an equal percentage of those conservation parcels.
Is that going to negatively affect your ability to sell these
Yeah,
lots?
Joe and I were just chatting, and look, I mean, frankly, you can say it's a market decision, I suppose, but that's a relatively small unit count to establish a homeowners association with that kind of obligation.
9.
But I mean, I don't know. So the answer is it might.
It could be written into deeds, too.
Right, and I think we would want it to be, but that's, not strictly speaking our concern, but it is
Yeah,
a concern, I think.
These,
The layout isn't typical homeowners either.
Right.
Your typical homeowners is where they all live in a cluster. And
Yeah.
the surrounding property is the preserve, the open space.
Right. It's a little atypical in its development model, but it's not legally inappropriate, if that's the way they want to go.
It doesn't,
And the conservation subdivision, we would also be reducing the length of these roads and probably supplying some common driveways. Most likely, off the Dr. Tony side, we would certainly shorten that road up as much as we could in a common driveway to more than the 2 lots which are currently here, which would obviously be modified in that conservation layout. But the intent is certainly to reduce impervious surface, conserve environmentally sensitive lands, and proceed with what I believe was what was discussed at the site walk and that the board.
we never discussed clustering.
Yeah, you're probably jumping ahead of what was discussed, but we did talk about, I think it's Lot 1 over there.
This one.
Yeah, which people had some real problems with.
Right.
in my opinion, I think this is an excellent idea if you can pull it off, because I think you're you know, I may not be representing the whole board, but as far as I'm concerned, you're saving land, you're going to maintain it, you're not restricted to this, what I believe was upzoning, and at one point where they made everything 3 acres of land, which I found to be not a good thing to do by the town fathers at that point in time. I don't know if that's an appropriate thing to say, but
Very appropriate.
I think
Well, I mean, you can see
All the property around Wood Street.
the frontage required in this zone being 250 feet. There's a significant amount of usable land, especially throughout the central portion of this
Yeah.
property, that in a conventional layout is somewhat wasted.
yeah, I assume that what you're driving at would be something that from my training, I would have suggested as a benefit for everybody. So, but you, as we said, that's going to affect your saleability. But if you think it's something that can be done, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, I have nothing against having those units on 2 acres versus 3. 3 is a lot. A
Yeah,
lot of lawn to cut, a lot of stuff to take care of.
Right, Chris?
Put it on 2, that's fine. You're not gonna change materially, you're not gonna change the value of each lot. Okay? My only concern about this would be the homeowners, quote, homeowners association, or the lack of maintenance of the open space. Should there be requirements to clean it up? People dump stuff in there. We got water courses that need to be cleaned out a little. I don't know, but that's my only concern.
Well, that's understood, and I think all of those maintenance responsibilities would certainly be spelled out in easement documents and homeowners association documents, deed restrictions, things like that. You know, again, it's,
Yeah, but it's just.
there's another consideration that
Yeah,
we've
but-
been asked to consider, and that's the Somers Land Trust has asked us in such situations, rather than a homeowners association, to consider that that deed restrictions be granted to them, and that they once a year would come to make sure.
I don't
that-
think the applicant would
I
have
don't-
any objection to that. You know,
Well-
that certainly makes it cleaner from,
Well, I'm not sure what it does to a homeowners association. There
Well,
might
who-
still
who
have
pays
to
the-
be one, I'm not
But who
sure.
pays the tax on the property under those conditions?
Well, they don't own it, they're just,
That's right.
Yeah, I don't think
They
that's.
control it, but they don't pay the taxes
yeah,
on it.
that's correct.
That's,
that could.
Well,
that
the
could-
other question is, how long has this land existed the way it is right now?
Since.
300 years?
Stefan is, 300 years, yeah.
Right.
A lot longer than I've been around.
Okay, so I'm saying is that there hasn't been any dumping in that area, there hasn't been any maintenance of those areas for 300 years. I'm not sure that.
No one's really lived in them either.
No.
This is all,
Yeah.
Yeah, but,
you know, hard to access.
Other than the,
It's all
They have to
about-
build roads and
yeah, but they have,
cul-de-sacs.
but they have, this borders on an existing community that could have affected this.
which prevented people from running in there and dumping.
Right, right. Okay, well, yeah,
my question, those 9 clustered homes, how close together were they going to be?
On 2 acres,
Well, I'm not so sure. Clustering is clustering. I've seen a lot of clustering by $1 million homes in this town. And look over in
well,
Granite Springs,
we
look how
won't know
close
that
they
until
are
we get
together.
a plan.
Look how close together they are. I'm
mean,
not being critical of that. I want to bring up the fact that when we cluster, that brings in the
I would
architecture.
expect, you know, based on the required property setbacks, even with the reduced conservation zoning, I could maintain between 75 and 100 feet between homes.
Okay, well, the reason I brought that up is our zoning requires that if we get involved with clustering with you, it means you have to go before the zoning board of, before the architectural review board. They have to review what you cluster. They don't review individual homes, but the minute we cluster, the code says the resulting structures, because they're clustered, they don't define whether they're next to each other, fee
So those
simple.
individual lots, when they came in for building permits,
I beg your pardon?
those individual lots, when they came in for building permits, would need architectural review board in a conservation subdivision versus a conventional?
All I'm telling you, I read this in the code book, that if we cluster, that means anything that's clustered, if we go from a 9-lot subdivision to clustering, whatever it is you build, they get to review.
I wasn't aware of that.
Is that true?
I'll have to look it up. And the other thing I'll have to look
I
up,
realize what you're clustering is on, according to you, 75 feet apart from each other, but when I read it, we cluster, and we've been avoiding this issue.
What, is there a
I
definition of
don't
clustering?
throw that out as a detriment, I just
Yeah.
read it in the code book.
Feet-wise?
yeah, the town code has a section on conservation easements. One of the reasons I didn't get, or conservation subdivisions, et cetera, one of the reasons I didn't really detail it, because I think, like the board, I was informed after the board's site walk that that was not going to be their recommendation to you. I did see that in your comment back, but I thought there might have been some misunderstanding. But apparently, there is not a misunderstanding. Apparently, this is what your client is asking you to do, in spite of the fact that the board,
Oh, that maybe the misunderstanding was that I was under the impression that the board, based on recommendations, I think the conservation board also recommended the conservation subdivision.
Yeah, well,
Well,
And there was some discussion.
But they're not
They're a
our-
That's
committee.
understood.
they're not
They're
our
a
boss.
committee.
That's understood. And it certainly is an option that the applicant has asked to explore. Now, if the board sends us in a different direction, the board sends us in a different direction.
I need to see the two.
Yeah,
To-
we need to see,
We
we
need to
need to
see
see a layout.
We hadn't considered it seriously. Now you're asking us to consider it seriously. I need to see the A and B, so I can do the comparison to make an informed decision.
And that conservation subdivision layout that we proceed with to present back to the board acknowledges that we can proceed with a nine lot.
That's-
I don't think,
That's
I don't
really
think,
where.
I don't think the lot count is the issue.
Well, there's a couple, let me step in here for a second. There's two things I wanted to, there's two things that, just before we move on to the lot count. I just want to make sure, I thought I heard you say that one of the reasons why you wanted to put into conservation was so that the areas of where there's existing usage and walking paths could maintain. Is that going to be, I just want to make sure that, because if that's the case, your homeowner's documents will need to reflect somehow allowing public access onto these properties. So I just wanted to,
It could be certainly something that we'd have to discuss more in detail.
Okay.
I mean, it's-
I just wanted to
right
clarify
now-
that
Right
point.
now, this is a vacant piece of land that's used by people in the neighborhood. Whether or not they're technically allowed to be on the property,
right.
they use it.
I'm just saying
it's
there's a distinction between you look the other way when people use it,
Exactly.
and we say that we're putting it in conservation to help facilitate that. So I think it is an important thing to check with the
And
client on.
there's a difference between people walking the trails and kids with dirt bikes.
That's true. Right now, I think we have both of those.
That's my point.
So as it comes to the lot count, did you bring the alternatives look that we talked about on the phone the other day?
I sent you an email, I wasn't sure if you got it today.
I've been in the townhouse all day today.
So we did put together an alternative sketch.
So let me just bring the board up to speed on this, right? So we were talking about the lot count. And obviously, we have a pretty long memo, but many of the comments are details and probably, again, similar to Surratt, would be more in line with a conventional subdivision, the kind of comments we'd have not necessarily geared towards the lot count. When we, obviously there, I think I went through, there's a handful of them that are applicable to the lot count, really two that I want to bring up. One
is, I think, the most important one, and we brought this up last time, is related to Lot 1. I look at this, and I understand the layout, and I understand the added an access road. You know, the quandary for me is I'm not so sure that I would ever feel comfortable approving a conventional subdivision that had that basin as inaccessible as it is off the road. We've asked for that to be moved up closer to the road. What I'd like to see to prove that lot out is, can that lot be created, you know, basically swap where the septic is with where the basin is? And if that to me would be an important element to prove that Lot 1 is a lot that we should count in the lot count. At least we should look at that alternative and understand that. I've given the applicant some leeway on the field testing. We can assume the field testing that was done in the present location is the same testing that we would apply for the new location, and really just look at it from an area requirement perspective and make sure that it all fits and could work. I suspect it will, but it's just, I know that I have comments on the record, and I just don't think that this would be a scenario that the highway department would be comfortable with. So as a result, I would want to make sure that before we consider this a 9-lot subdivision for conservation purposes, that we can build that lot with the basin up front.
So obviously the board hasn't seen this, and I guess Joe hasn't seen it either, but the alternative we prepared was essentially this basin was placed in the area which is now our proposed septic area on Lot 1. The septic area was placed in the southeastern portion of the property, and an infiltration system was placed in this location for roof drains for the house. So, and the driveway. So the on-lot improvements, the on-lot impervious surface would be dealt with wholly within its own boundaries and dealt with in its own system. And the common improvements would be dealt in a stormwater basin, is essentially the alternate that Joe was talking about.
So we could coordinate in the review of that in this intervening period between now and the next meeting. If the board wanted to proceed, you know, this evening with a lot count. Otherwise, I think we'd be here back looking at that and making sure that we're all comfortable with it. The only other comment is, which I think is relatively minor, but to be consistent with precedent, I think you've assumed some infiltration rates on your infiltration basins.
Yes.
I would just like to see some actual testing on that in those locations to just demonstrate that, yes, that's what it is, so that we can prove out the infiltration areas as, yes, that's how big they are. I know you've modeled them, I know you've made some assumptions. I would think we should do a couple of tests to validate that those are appropriate soil conditions.
Is that something that you'd want to see before you'd feel comfortable with acknowledging a 9-lot?
I haven't seen the soils, right? I mean, you guys have said they're good. You've assumed pretty high rates, but for all I know, it's solid clay. I have no idea, right? So I would like to see that as part of the, you know, the submittal. Now, again, is something we can handle in the intervening period between now and the next board meeting, and the applicant, you know, may want to proceed based on the board's direction in that regard on the number of lots. But those are just the items that I thought were those that, you know, following precedents that we've done before, that we should follow before we do the final lot count.
Clearly, we have to know whether we have 9 lots. There's a big difference between 9 and 8.
Yeah, but
I mean, from a zoning standpoint, and I think, I believe that Surratt's memo identifies this as well. You know, there was, with the exception of a couple of typos in the zoning table, from a zoning standpoint, this conventional 9-lot layout satisfies applicable zoning requirements. And I believe I'm correct in saying that.
Yes, but that's why I turned to Joe to find out from an engineering point of view if.
Now,
So usually what I do at that point is, without going too crazy on the details, can everything that needs to be on the lots fit on the lots, right? And that's what we're talking about now.
Which is essentially what we're talking about and what this demonstrates. Now, I respect the point of view and the comments regarding the access to this basin. And ultimately, we don't really want to build it there anyway. You know, the intention is that if the board does allow us to proceed with a conservation subdivision, that basin will move up the hill. into the location that was presented to Joe in the alternative. We have done testing in this area, we have done testing throughout the property. Based on the existing topography and the testing that we've completed, it is a viable site for infiltration. I know the access can be a little difficult. We've provided an access path that is less than a 20% grade, essentially 18% grade on grass pavers. I'm not saying it's the easiest basin to access, but it's a let's call it a viable location from a stormwater and properties, from a soil and just properties available area standpoint.
I'll have Tommy give you a call tomorrow. He'll tell you what he thinks about maintaining that basin.
Can we simultaneously, I would assume you want to move ahead with this, so can we simultaneously, you satisfy Joe's thing that this is a 9, could be made a 9 lot, which may be totally superfluous, assuming we do some conservation. I also think that there was conversation during our site walk that we were critical of that lot 1, and I think some people may have inside comments made, gee, you know, this might be an interesting place for a conservation district without actually doing. So that may be why there's this confusion. I remember conservation
Without actually doing the subdivision?
No, he's referring to maybe the comments on the site walk that might have led to
the sidewalk is what somebody might have interpreted as we were in favor of it. Okay. As I've said, as far as I'm concerned, if you can prove that this is a viable 9-lot thing, I can't see why.
Right, and that's why I was suggesting when I meant the intervening period, that's what I meant, right? Which is, I wasn't in the office today, so I didn't get to see the map, right? You know, and as it relates to the infiltration areas and doing testing, you know, I would just suggest it's just contingent on you just submitting some testing in that regard, right? I don't think that has to hold this up.
Right.
I think that the lot 1 doesn't necessarily have to hold it up, but they have to come in front of us next time, and I'll have to report out that, yes, I think this is good, and then they could be presenting the conservation, so you can see the side-by-sides. I'd want that side-by-side, though, to have that basin up front. Only because sometimes, you know, in all honesty, I've seen in the conventional.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I just have seen some of these. You know, sometimes time goes by, and then all of a sudden, well, forget about the conservation. Let's go back to the conventional, and all of a sudden, this is the plan that's up, and now I'm getting yelled at by Tommy for allowing a basin in the woods that we can't take care of. So I just would want the actual drawing that we're using for the lot count to be reflective of that basin in the front. So that if for some reason there's a fallback and I'm not here, you know, I win the lottery. I never say I get hit by a bus anymore. If I win the lottery and I'm not here anymore, the next person will know that was the basis of of it. I don't think it's going to be a problem, but I think we should go through those exercises.
Agreed. And I think it's also fair to note that as we proceed with the conservation layout, if we go down that road, we obviously have to go through all the design parameters and prove that subdivision out. And prove all elements of that subdivision out for all involved agencies as well as the town.
Correct.
Planning and engineering departments.
Okay. I think the first step for this evening, anyway, is to declare ourselves lead agency. The 30 days since we have the declaration has expired. So we will declare ourselves lead agency on this? Yeah. I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have that discussion. We'll see you, I guess, next time with
a conventional,
2 plans.
Conventional layout and a conservation layout.
Right.
A conventional 9-lot swap, working on lot 1. In that time, just go out and run a couple perk tests to make sure that, you know, the infiltration, I don't think it's going to be a problem, but just to be consistent with what we've done on some recent ones, I just want to be consistent with that.
A lot 1 that Tommy will approve.
One question.
Sure.
The, looking at lot 1, the southern property line, I don't know whether it's south, but the lower, would swinging that a little bit help?
This way?
Yeah. The lot below it is oversized, so I mean, it's not a,
Yeah, it
I'm
would
ju-
certainly
I'm
give us
just-
some more room, but with the lot as it's laid out right now and the alternative that was presented to Joe, we actually were able to fit septic area, infiltration
Okay,
area,
that was my
and
question.
infiltration basin for the road.
septic and the,
So essentially, the house and driveway would drain to its own subsurface infiltration system for stormwater treatment. The septic area would be in the southeastern corner, and the infiltration basin to treat the runoff from the road would be located in what is now identified as a septic area.
That sounds good.
And then I think you put that side by side with what a conservation would look like, given the comments of the board this evening.
okay,
Okay,
see you next time.
we'll see you.
Thank you. Okay, and the final item this evening is the Paramount at Somers. This is a review again.
There we go. Thanks. I'm Bob Seigert with Shop for Architects, and I'm here representing the Paramount at Somers. I believe we responded to all the comments that we had from the last meeting, and the planner's gone through and accepted all of those. The only one that is written as a partial acceptance was the parking issue. Basically asking for a parking management plan during construction to make sure that there's always enough handicap and visitor spaces. So I've talked with the owner a little bit. We're in discussions on that about how they best do that, and I don't know if the board has specific requirements for that, but the owner, we've talked to the owner about, basically notifying, asking their staff to carpool, at least during this 6-month period, to have some additional carpooling, and having a staff member responsible for monitoring parking. And basically going out there, particularly in the heavy times when they have a lot of visitors, to make sure that there's enough parking there. And if there isn't, to designate some additional spaces, to have some extra signs there, to be able to move staff vehicles. I mean, every time I've been there, there's been enough spaces, but they're down in the back 40, and so they realize that they need to stay on their staff to make sure that they're parking further away. If they need to shuttle the staff up, they'll do that. But they want to be able to stay flexible so that they can address whatever the issues might be. Whether it's staff parking where they're not supposed to, or whether it's just the spaces filling up.
Yeah, I think it's in their own best interest.
Oh,
and certainly ours, that
definitely.
priority for parking goes to the visitors.
Oh, definitely.
Not the staff.
Definitely. They don't want complaints either inside the building or outside the building. That doesn't, that's just a problem for them. So I have been there when the spaces were. They were not all full, but it was pretty full. So it does happen, and they're going to have to keep after that and make sure that those, for instance, the 16 cars that are in the area where the contractor is going to be parking, that those vehicles are not parking nearby. They're going to have to park down in the back lot, which they seem to have enough spaces back there, and they're 1s and 2s and 3s down there, but. They realize they're going to have to keep on that.
But on a day like today, with the rain that we're getting now, some people are going to be very uncomfortable.
That's true. That's true.
I can remember walking the Pepsi parking lot And you could get absolutely soaked getting to the building.
Absolutely, absolutely.
This rain brings up an issue that I had mentioned previously. Could we see the site plan?
Yes, certainly.
And I know this is probably outside of our jurisdiction, but
Yeah.
the description here in our memo basically says, replacing existing concrete entry patio and planting beds with a new ornamental concrete an open walkway canopy to the vehicle drop-off area. Okay? That canopy is well short of the vehicle drop-off area.
Correct. And I know we talked about that last time, and I talked to the owners about it, but
They don't want to do it.
well, there's a couple things. There are oil tanks and piping right here, okay, existing, and this curb is a flush curb here, okay? So it's happened a little bit before. People have not been watching exactly what they're doing, and they've come up on the sidewalk area. But between those two, could we move this a little farther forward? Yeah, but not much, not without risking either, the columns up here getting hit possibly, or that oil tanks and piping, which they don't, they want to make sure that they don't hit anything there. So it's not perfect. The idea is this is an improvement over what they have out now, a big improvement, but the site just won't allow them to take it all the way out to the edge of the road.
All right, well, I'll drop my...
It's a good suggestion. We did look at it very seriously.
Okay, well, as long as you looked at it, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I don't know.
I have no other issues, and Joe's office had no issues. The only thing I'll point out that I did not put on the action sheet is we do have to have the board accept its role as lead agency. Because you did intent at the last meeting, it was September 11th that you did it on, so
Right.
30 days have passed, and you can,
Oh, so declare ourselves lead agency.
right.
Similar to the last, I'll make a motion, we declare ourselves lead agency.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Do we have to do this every 30 days?
No. When the intention, you have to wait 30 days for the other agencies to come back and
Okay,
and say, no,
good.
you can't.
Oh, okay.
And once they come back, once they don't object, we can then declare ourselves.
Oh, okay, good. I'm sorry.
Free and clear.
We have to wait 30 days.
Okay,
Everybody else.
I'm ignorant of that fact. I apologize.
Okay. Then to set a site plan public hearing for our meeting on November 13th.
Make a motion.
Public hearing on November 13th.
Okay?
What was your motion? Did somebody,
Yeah, I said that.
somebody second it?
Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we'll see you on November 13th.
Thank you very much.
I guess that's it, huh? Anything else? Any other business?
That went fast.
Surratt, any other business?
For the board,
Wait a minute.
or on this, no. Okay, yes, the other thing that's actually come up, which I guess I wasn't aware of, is the December 11th. Who was the one that mentioned?
So let me give, I know that the planning board has asked for updates for other projects going on in town, and it actually connects very nicely into what Surratt is bringing up. Just to give the board the update on the sewer projects in Lincolndale and Shenorock. We've been through a public process this summer, had 3 public meetings, 3 public hearings. That led to the town board taking action to form the district on September 12th. That facilitated a 30-day referendum period where the public could come in and petition for a special election. There was a very low threshold of the number of petitions that needed to be submitted. And tonight, at a special meeting of the town board, there was a certification from the town clerk of that they received the requisite number of signatures to facilitate a special election vote. The town board has scheduled that for December 11th, and we met afterwards. There's going to be now another series of informational meetings between now and the 11th, when that special election vote will happen in this room. So that's why Saret was look for rescheduling of that date.
Yeah, we have to move the meeting. Discussion earlier before this meeting started was, did we want to move it to the 18th, or did we want to move the location?
We're going to look at Barbara's got the town calendar to see when rooms and everything are available. The 18th court is in here, so that does not
Okay.
work. The 10th, this room is available.
Tuesday?
Which is a Tuesday. I'm just telling you when the room is available.
Doesn't zoning meet
Now,
on Tuesday?
not on the 10th. The zoning board is on the 17th.
Saturdays.
And on the 19th, the architectural review board, I don't know, I think once before.
Normally, we don't change the date of the meeting. We meet in a different location, such as the library or the senior
Van Tassel.
Van Tassel. That's what we have done in the
We went to the
past.
school once, or
That's
the
what we
library.
have done in the past.
So we have to ask the TV person, because this has to be broadcast. Whether, this is always the problem when we move it. We've got to move the whole kit and caboodle here. So if we move, what is your availability?
Make it happen.
You can make it happen. So if we want to hold it on the 11th, we have to explore availability of other venues. And Barbara can look into that on Friday.
And we can make our decision at our November meeting.
Yeah, you got plenty of time to notice.
Right.
Yeah.
So
We haven't made any commitments for the December meeting yet. We haven't scheduled any public
Right,
hearings
but
or
now that
anything.
we know, we want to
Yeah.
do that. All right, so we will start to identify that and.
What are our alternatives?
Okay.
The point of question on that vote for the district, is there a percentage? Is it just 50.1%?
So if you want the full explanation, I'd suggest you listen to the October 14th meeting of the town board, where Roland went through a detailed discussion on this. I will paraphrase based on my understanding
Please do.
with that caveat. It's my understanding that eligible voters are defined by individuals whose name exists on the deed. Okay, so if your name is on the deed, you become an eligible voter. All of the eligible voters that show up to vote, so eligible voters that show up to vote, no absentee ballots, that show up in this room and vote, it becomes a simple majority at that point.
Not of the eligible voters, but.
Of the eligible
majority
vote,
of the people who come and
the
vote.
eligible voters who actually vote. I think that's exact words that he used, was the majority of the eligible voters who actually vote.
And it's by property, so if you own 3 properties, you get to vote 3 times.
That's actually was clarified as not being the case. It's only, but it's by, if an individual, if I own 3 properties, and all of those 3 properties were in my name on the deed, I only get 1 vote.
Really?
What?
Yes, that's what was reported, 1 vote.
How does that work?
I'm just,
Constitutional?
Yeah, wait.
One man, one vote.
Yeah,
I'm just explaining my understanding from what I heard at the town board meeting. Like I said, if you want to see the full discussion, I would suggest you look at
because
that.
I know that there's been some some opposition, and,
I think there's been a vocal minority, is
Yeah,
what
but-
that seems.
but don't you risk with a vocal minority, having people show up? What if only the vocal minority shows up?
Well, you do risk that, which is why these votes, it's important for the people who care about it to get people out. But I think it does seem counterintuitive until you think about the rationale for why it's not the other way. If it was the other way, we'd be back in a colonial era position where you were voting essentially by acreage, right? Like whoever owns the most land has the most votes and becomes, it doesn't matter what the rest of the landowners think. And yeah, so it's a little counterintuitive, but the contrary position, the idea is to have people who own property and therefore are affected by the change to have a vote. But as Joe said, one man, one woman, one vote. Otherwise, you're basically just saying who's got the biggest, swath of land.
My only thought, just to think, if I own 3 individual lots.
Right.
Or 5 individual lots, I'm subject to 5 times the impact.
Correct. That's true. That's true. Yeah. I mean, that is the other side of that discussion, but it,
I know that, again, I would suggest if you really want to know, Roland quoted some
I'm not a lawyer.
opinion, I know, neither am I. But Roland quoted some, he actually called the state controller's office and quoted some decisions from the state controller's office that align with this determination.
Wow.
So it's my understanding, I'm just
blame it on Albany.
I'm just the engineer on it, but that's my understanding of what I heard the other day.
That's-
So the husband and wife, both their names are on the parcel.
They both get to vote.
So there are 2 votes for the
Correct.
parcel?
So if for example, in my home, both my name and my wife's name are on the deed, we would get 2 votes.
Holy
but
cow.
if Joe's name was on another deed,
On another, if I owned an adjacent property that was by itself with my name on it, I don't get another vote.
Wait a second, so whoa, wait a second.
What
This-
about if
this-
Uh-oh.
how about if a property is in a family trust?
Yeah, right.
Who,
I didn't hear a family trust, I heard an LLC gets 1 vote.
Oh, so a family trust gets
family
one.
trust with 5 members?
Well, yeah, what happens if on the deed you have your
Can't answer all the
husband,
what
wife, and
ifs.
5 children? They get 7 votes?
I think they would, but there are very specific rules about the way in which your ownership is stated on a deed, whether tenants by entirety and,
Oh, who's going to be here to determine
So I don't
this?
want-
It's already been, Patty is working out what the eligible voter list looks like. That's what she's been working on.
Interesting.
So it's interesting, if you want to
It's very
learn.
interesting reading. I mean, honestly, if you really did want to go find what Roland was quoting, I've been through this before too. It really is kind of fascinating reading if that sort of thing interests you.
Yeah, so I will just say, I'm explaining my understanding based on being at the meeting. Roland explained it in greater detail, and if you want to watch the video, I think it's towards the end of the video. Look for where Rick slams the gavel down, and it's about 5 minutes before that.
Hey, that sounds,
So I just wanted to give the board an update. I know the board was interested in updates, and I figured I'd take this opportunity to give you that update.
Our next meeting is November 13th. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everyone.
Try to see.